This is Pop Culture Confidential, and I'm Christina Yerling Biru. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today we're talking about Bruce Springsteen on film, his cinematic inspirations, and how his music lives on the big screen. We're going to dig into the upcoming biopic, Deliver Me From Nowhere, starring Jeremy Allen White, centered on Springsteen's masterpiece, Nebraska, an album born out of depression and darkness. With me to unpack Bruce, the man who swears he'll openly weep if Springsteen shows up at the Telluride Film Festival. He is the boss of film criticism. He is the other poet of the working class, my friend Ryan McQuade of AwardsWatch. Welcome back, Ryan.
I was going to do something silly to start that off. Holy shit. I'm going to put that in my new byline. My God. That's the other poet of the working class. Wow. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to take it. You can't take it back now, Christina. Way to also pat my ego. Thank you so much for having me here. And yes, I bend the knee at the altar of Bruce. And if that does happen, I can't guarantee that it won't be a mess when I see this film later this year.
Yeah, you felt like the right person to talk about this. I mean, none of us have, of course, seen this movie. We're hoping that we'll see it in just a few days at the Telluride Film Festival, but we'll see what happens. We still don't know as of the recording, but it feels like this is one of the big events for you. Why don't we start with this movie? What are your thoughts? Deliver Me From Nowhere is based on Warren Zane's book about the making of Nebraska. Jeremy Allen White is going to be playing Bruce. The rest of the cast includes Jeremy Strong. Scott Cooper is directing. What do you make of this?
I think that this is actually like a really interesting thing to do for a Springsteen biopic. I always kind of wondered for years, like, what would be like? Would it be the sort of cradle to grave biopic that we saw with like Elvis or Johnny Cash, or as recently last year as Bob Dylan with A Complete Unknown? And while all those movies are like good, I usually like biopics or historical dramas to be about a section of life. Everybody knows that my love for a movie like Oppenheimer or JFK or Lawrence of Arabia, these aren't like from the time they were a little baby to the moment they died. You know what I mean? It's nothing like that.
Film by Robert Zemeckis.
Exactly. Here. But I like slices of life in movies, and I also just like sections, because I think talking about the important moments of when they shape an artist's career is very interesting without actually being like the time maybe when they had the big hits. This is not the time in which Springsteen made a giant hit. He made his most personal album here with Nebraska, and that's what this is. This is in between him coming off of, a successful run of albums with the E Street Band, particularly The River, this double album, stadium tour, going all over the place with it. Just this era of Bruce that most people really got to know him from. And then he goes and does Nebraska, which is a very personal album, and we'll get into talking about it and everything. And through that comes these very vulnerable personal songs. And then also comes the song that then everybody would know Bruce for and misinterpret over the next 40 years, which is Born in the USA. And I think that it's great. The novel's great. As a Bruce fan, that has his autobiography, that has multiple Bruce books. This is a perfect book to talk about this very vulnerable time in his life. And also, I think the turning point for him creatively, talking about his lyrics and being more broad about our politics and our personal struggles, and being socially conscious, as well as being very vulnerable and personal. We'll talk about those influences.
And turning point for him personally,
Yeah.
I mean, that he was struggling with all this fame and depression and thinking about his upbringing and kind of
His relationship
trauma
with
of his father.
Yeah.
And all this seemed to have happened here in the making of Nebraska, and such an incredible turning point, which we'll talk about in some of the tracks coming up. But yeah, sorry, continue with Jeremy Allen White.
Well, I think
Of
Jeremy
course, the
Allen White,
actor from The Bear.
Bear, Iron Claw, Shameless. I think Jeremy Allen White is an excellent choice, not just because he's a short king like Bruce, but because of the fact that he's a very method actor, and he takes things very serious. And when he was talking a lot about the Von Erichs with the Iron Claw, he was particularly very careful about what he did and what he didn't do, and it was very precious to him. And when you hear people talk about Jeremy Allen White, I was seeing a promo for the not very good Darren Aronofsky film that's coming out, where Austin Butler, Zoe Kravitz, and Regina King were talking, and they were talking about Austin Butler has like sort of just a very calm and and even demeanor and very soft spoken and but very meaningful. And he said, and Regina King, who directed a couple episodes of Shameless and was in a couple episodes of Shameless, said that's very much like Jeremy Allen White. And I think it's perfect because Bruce, he's as big on stage. And then when you hear him in interviews and see him talk, he's very down to earth and he's not crazy big. He's not, on stage, he's fireworks. And behind the scenes, he's just a pond in your backyard. He's very even. And so I think Jeremy Allen White's perfect for that. I think like Jeremy Strong playing John Landau, that's a perfect casting. Somebody that like Strong who's very committed.
Yeah, another
Stephen
very committed actor.
Stephen Graham playing his father, coming off of
That I think is going to be, if I can predict even without seeing it, I think that we can be looking at a supporting actor for Graham. Emmy and Oscars here, from adolescence to
yeah,
Bruce's father. I just
exactly.
feel this is going to be
It's
his.
either him or Strong. I mean, Strong's very much heavy in the trailer, the opening trailer, but you see the foreshadowing in the black and white in Graham's sections from when Bruce was a child, and so I think I think it could be really interesting. Scott Cooper is not probably the first director I would have assumed to do something like this. But I'm very excited to see him kind of go back to a musical route. I think when he did like a movie like Crazy Heart, which really broke him onto the scene with Jeff Bridges, I thought that was like a very good movie, and it carried Bridges to the Oscar, and won original song. And so it seems very personal. And this is a big movie, um, for a lot of us Bruce heads out here. But for audiences, it's going to, I think, kind of surprise them that it's not about just the hits. It shows that they're going to be a little bit of hinting at the hits, maybe like early on. That's when we see the Born to Run sequence. But it's not going to be that the entire way through.
Talking about the cinematic influences, one thing we know about Nebraska is that the album was heavily influenced by Terrence Malick's 1973 film Badlands, starring Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek, which was kind of a fictionalized film about Charles and Carol Ann Fugate, who went on a killing spree in the 50s, this young couple, very much exploring sort of how ordinary people can become so violent and are very alienated from society and class and all this that this movie was about. And this seemingly was the film that when Bruce sat down in this room alone after doing all these stadium tours, just him and himself, writing this record, why was he so influenced by it at this moment in time?
That movie is very much about. I mean, we talked about this on Director Watch literally last year, with Dan Bayer. So if you want my full rambling thoughts on that, you can go over to Director Watch on the AwardsWatch feed and listen to that entire episode and then that entire series on Malick. Um, I mean, that is a movie about the lost innocence of a generation and them fighting back against the machine and and doing it in a very violent and uncontrolled manner. And I think there's also this like elegance of America within the misunderstood person inside of it. And if you don't nurture, or if you don't, or if you don't give a path to success for someone, then they can be led down a path where they are destructive and dangerous. And then this very young couple can then become murderers. And the song Nebraska is from the perspective of the Martin Sheen character in that film. And, basically, he's sorry by the end of it for what he's done, but, you know, really the only thing that matters at the end of it is that I just want to be with this girl, and it's such an interesting film for Bruce to see and look at, and see that, as his life's going on, the generation of his that he's singing music to, in the 70s and 60s, leading up to the 80s, they've gone through a lot of hard times, gone through a war, they've gone through political, being lied to politically, culture's changing, the world is changing,
And this is
racially,
overtly
socially.
violent, this couple, of
It
course. What
very
they
is.
did,
Yeah.
you can feel, of course, in Bruce's oeuvre in general, there is, he's often sort of touching upon the violence that generation has been through,
The
maybe
violence of
not
the
as quite as
system.
overtly
Yeah.
as this. Exactly, right.
Yeah. And I mean, like, this wasn't the only thing he was using as inspiration. I mean, this is the direct inspiration. But, he was watching, this is when he started watching films like The Grapes of Wrath and John Ford's wonderful adaptation of John Steinbeck's epic novel, and about the disparity of a working class that is going all the way to California in hopes of um, of hopes of a better life, and the rejection, I think, of a lot of people on that. That's what's really struck me when I rewatched it a couple of years ago, is the rejection of these people trying to have a better life from the same people that they live in this country with. And sort of, there's a scene where these kids are trying to get, want candy, at the convenience store, and these people, the person there selling the candy is just giving them this just real nasty look. And I'll never forget that look, because you know because that's not how we should be as Americans. And yet by the end of that, Tom Joad is talking about, literally, like, I have to take matters into my own hands in order to fight for the little man, because the systems of government and the systems of power are not going to be there to save us like they
Mm.
say they are. And then it is funny, then, like 15, 20 years later, he makes a whole album called The Ghost of Tom Joad. And it's, and literally taking that movie and dissecting it, within a song. And then there's John Huston's Wise Blood, which is a very religious film, and it's a, this sort of, um, it's this black comedy about, a veteran preacher who preaches, sort of at this agnostic church of truth without Christ. And so our struggling of an identity of, as someone that is religious, as Bruce is, but then also struggling with the identity of a culture, clash with religion. And this was sort of, I think, the time in the 70s is when, the turning of religion being a mandatory thing, in the face of rock and roll, drugs, culture, the war, Nixon. And I think that he's was looking at that film from 79 and seeing the turn there. And then there's the movie called True Confessions, which is another, it's with Duvall and De Niro, and it's about a priest, and having the moral quandaries within religion as well. So I think he's
He's
tapping into that.
wrestling.
He's
Yeah.
wrestling. He's literally wrestling with his upbringing, his religious background, his
With
the this
America.
with America, his small town values now mixing in with the big world.
He's
Um,
suddenly rich and famous and
yeah, I mean,
in a class journey that he couldn't have imagined.
I mean, at the time he's reading books. There's this book that he mentions. If you listen to the thing I love the most is Bruce's live recordings, and there's this great 3 disc, recording box of sessions from 1975 to 1985, I think it is. And there's a song when he does a rendition of "This Land Is Your Land," and he talks about this book, Joe Klein's Woody Guthrie, A Life, and is listening to the struggles of Woody Guthrie and what he went through. Obviously, Woody Guthrie was just literally shown a little bit in A Complete Unknown, but that is a pioneer of the folk music, a pioneer of speaking about America. Literally, we don't have Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen without Woody Guthrie. And then he's also reading Born on the Fourth of July by Ron Kovac, in this movie that would be the kind of the 80s poster child for the Vietnam War and rebellion from Oliver Stone, and so he's got all of this within him. He's wrestling and wrestling and wrestling
Alone in
and
this room.
alone and wanting, no, and really wanting the isolation, and kind of craving it because he was so consumed by like you said, the idea of fame and stadium tours and women and just everything. It's so much that he stepped away from it. And yeah, it was just him and a sound mixer in this room, and the idea of just doing these songs as demos was really the thing that sort of revved his engine, and it released maybe the most important music. And from that point, then on, the Bruce Springsteen as a musician, the working class, I think, is really the one that steps in from Nebraska.
I was just thinking when I was rewatching Badlands, is how absolutely beautiful, stunning Sissy Spacek, how much she looks like Patty Scialfa.
No, she really does.
I was like, wow.
And what's so
And
funny
Martin
about
Sheen's
that,
t-shirt and
and yeah, and that I think like that there's that scene where like he's got like the gun or something, and he's got his arms over there, and I'm like, and he's in a flannel, and I'm like, oh, that's Bruce Springsteen. You know what I mean?
yes,
Like,
I know.
you know what I mean? Like, and he's got the hair and everything. It's like, oh, okay, that's Bruce. The other thing that I think is also a big influence on the structure of the writing of the lyrics and of the way in which he was telling stories is he read a collection of Flannery
Oh, right.
O'Connell stories, and really, really dived into the way that she was able to weave a tapestry within her work, and that really spoke to him. So using this very influential female writer with all these very male angst and emotions, but using it in a very female sophisticated way. It's a very interesting way that he was clashing with various different texts and screen and all this different stuff. Yeah, it's such a rich album that's why it was like, it makes sense that this is a book and going to be the movie,
It does.
because it's such a turning point.
It is. It's such a turning point in his life. But talking about other film people who were actually influenced by him and by this, his close friend, Sean Penn,
Yes.
his movie, The Indian Runner from 1991, is directly based off of his song Highway Patrolman
Yeah.
from Nebraska. Of course, starring David Morse and Viggo Mortensen, about these two brothers in rural America, and based on the song. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a really interesting film. I mean, like, I think Penn as a directorial presence is a very inconsistent one. I mean, Highway Patrolman's a very, very beautiful, epic kind of storytelling song. And then the movie itself is very straightforward and doesn't really want to focus on the character, rather more than on plot, and kind of hit the themes of that, which are these two struggling brothers in their relationship, as opposed to them being on two sides of the law in this small town. And it feels like when you watch that movie, Penn understands the song, but he doesn't know how to utilize it and how to really honestly play with the themes that Springsteen's going with Nebraska. He's depicting it all, but he doesn't know how to harness the energy that I think that Bruce is able to evoke in this music. So it's an interesting film, and an interesting exercise to see Penn, who loves Springsteen and both, are very outspoken liberal advocates in their political lives, It is interesting to see that, him take a song like that of any song. But it's one of those where I do see the limitations of a first time director inside of it, but there's no denying like it's an interesting experiment. And I think you could do this with a lot of Springsteen songs of
Oh yeah,
taking,
there's little stories and
there's stories within it, and they're so personal that, then in the way also directors use his music throughout their work as well is
besides like songs, which we'll get to, his original songs and movies, are there other directors like Penn who have actually are influenced by his music, would you say?
I wouldn't say influence, but I feel like the tone of what David Chase did with his HBO series. Oh God, I think it's
Oh, you mean David Simon?
David Simon. I
Yeah,
mean,
Show Me a
I'm sorry.
Hero. He
Show
actually
Me a
used
Hero.
like a half a
He
dozen or a
he kind
dozen
of
Bruce
did it
Springsteen.
like, how Jean-Marc Vallée did Led Zeppelin for Sharp Objects. He kind of did
Hmm.
that there, and I think he really tapped into this New York, struggling in the 80s and really used Bruce as the soundtrack. And I think that that's like the closest we've seen to, maybe not literal adaptation of music, but use that as the forefront and then the backdrop, I mean, a little bit too, of this tapestry of characters that Simon's always able to really do. And I'm sorry for butchering David Simon's name. He's made one of my favorite television shows of all time, in The Wire. But and also like there's nothing more like awesome than to see Oscar Isaac in a bar put on Hungry Heart and be like, "This is my theme song." For a politician, and realize that like, yeah, this is going to be your demise, like in episode one, like it's
David
but
Simon's so much been working in the same themes as Bruce his whole
yeah, he works at
career. I
the
mean, in terms of class and what's happening to America
I think
politically and the struggle and
The Wire is a perfect example of
mm,
something like
yeah.
that, of just like understanding this music and then adapting it and molding it into something. Because I think like what he does every season is he tackled with The Wire a different aspect of the corruption and the problems in Baltimore, and he kind of does that with every one of his shows. And I think he's a very much a kindred spirit to what Bruce has been talking about over the years.
And what about his original songs? I mean, everyone, of course, knows that he did for Streets of Philadelphia for the 1993 movie Philadelphia,
Hmm.
which actually won him the
Hmm.
Oscar, right? And
Hmm.
Dead Men Walking, he did for the. Who does he want to give his songs to?
I
Do you see a
well,
pattern?
no, I mean like I think that I think that Dead Man Walking again with Penn there. um, I think he talks a lot about he likes he likes broken spirits and he likes interesting people. I mean, I think of and I think he thinks of just people that are abused by systems that don't have voices to speak up for themselves. I think of 41 Shots, which is a song that he did, which is talking about gun violence and in the black communities and how you can get there's a line in there, you can get killed just for living in your American skin, which is the other half of that title. And then he talks, he's talking about Land of Hope and Dreams and other songs. So it's it's he has this hopeful cynicism, and I know that that's weirdly contradicts itself, but I think that that's in like the Streets of Philadelphia. Like that's a it's that's a song written for a film about someone struggling with the disease of AIDS at a time where you still couldn't talk about it. And Denzel's character very much is struggling with his acceptance of the AIDS and what is it to be gay and then you see Tom Hanks's wonderful performance in there, and there's just it's almost like a prayer or a eulogy in that and then Dead Man Walking is sort of done to the same effect. And then The Wrestler, for Darren Aronofsky, like it that feels like, it's once again done from the perspective of somebody that has been a veteran and been taken advantage of and has seen things. And, you know, if you've ever seen a one trick pony, then you've seen me, you know what I mean? And, and and he's talked like, have you ever seen, like a dog in the street, then it's me, and He's talking about just like, if you've ever seen someone at the lowest point, then you probably have seen me. It's you don't have but you think of me as this being, this star, this thing, this entertainer. But I've been as low in that moment, and I think that that's where like Bruce, like he can put his political, he could put his social stuff inside these songs, but then he can also make it personal. Like I think that song For the Wrestler, I think that that's such a beautiful song, and later in Springsteen's life, because it's like we all have these emotions beyond just being on a stage or being in a ring. Like we're human beings,
Mhm.
and I think it was a crime that they tried to move those damn rules around, and that he wasn't able to get that Oscar, because I think he would have won it easily. He won like every critics prize for it, and he should have. And it felt almost weirdly like a great comeback theme for that film and Mickey Rourke and everything. And never would have thought Bruce Springsteen and Darren Aronofsky would have melded together, but sometimes it's just something personal too that just attaches. It's not necessarily a director. It's just someone personal to him that comes in. But he was a big fan with Demi. Like Demi was such a big Springsteen fan. Cameron Crowe, such a big Springsteen fan. But Demi was, I think, the real kind of lead into all that. And sadly, Demi's not with us anymore. But there could have been some really interesting stuff, I think. And I think Jonathan Demme honestly would have made this Deliver Me from
Yeah, I
Nowhere
was just gonna
Springsteen
say.
film. I
Yeah.
think he would have been, oh my God, I think he would have crushed it. Like,
Wow.
so
Do you have a favorite use of a Springsteen song in a film? Doesn't have to be one of his. I mean, or one of his originals for a film. Just a director who's used a Springsteen film, a song in a film. Or...
yeah, I mean, well, I just mentioned Cameron Crowe. I think his use of Secret Garden, which is in Jerry Maguire, which I think is such a funny thing because like it's used in such a romantic thing. It's him literally racing home to get to her to do the "You Had Me at Hello" and Secret. It's right before all that.
Yeah,
And
that's
what's
my.
so funny about that song is like it's weirdly one of the more inappropriate songs ever. Like I think like if you actually read the lyrics, it's like, oh, so she'll let you in her house and she'll
Her
let you in
secret
her
garden?
secret garden. And you're like, oh, Bruce, you naughty boy. Like it's, but like Crow uses it so tender as like this couple trying to get back together, and because they sort of, even though they're married at that point, like it's on the rocks. It's, we don't know at that point if it's going to last. And Cruz races home, and it's such a romantic moment. And God, I miss when Cameron Crowe made good movies,
Oh,
because he knew how to stick a damn landing.
yeah, and he knew how to do a needle drop and kill you.
He really did. The 25th hour, it's not in the film, it's in the post-credit scenes. But in to use the song The Fuse, and that is from the Rising album, which the Rising album was a collection of songs that Bruce made post 9/11. And he had one song actually pre-written before any of the attacks happened, and it's actually the most terrifying song because it's called My City of Ruins. And and it was completely not about that at all. It was not about, it was about Jersey. It was about, the fact that times have changed and everything, but it gets recontextualized, much like what we talked about in the other episode that we did last week with Zach Kreger's Weapons, is completely meant for a different thing, and then it takes on another life once new world things happen, and real events, and he made this personal album. Anyway, The Fuse is this very dark and somber song. And if you know anything about 25th Hour and Spike Lee, very New York guy, one of the very few films that Spike Lee doesn't have a predominantly a black cast, but it's a beautiful film, one of Spike's best, and tackling these three guys as it's post 9/11, and it's his homage to the city, and the city that's sort of still struggling to get itself off of its feet after a year of of one of the most devastating things. So I think that like they mirror each other perfectly.
Yeah, perfect theme for Bruce.
Blinded by the Light, which is a movie that I think it's a little too corny and sentimental as a Bruce fan for me, but there's a moment in that movie where the main young kid gets to go to, I think he goes to America, and he goes to Jersey and Asbury Park, and he gets to see everything from Bruce. And he's in a bar, and on the screen is Bruce playing a live version of a song called Independence Day. And Independence Day is I've heard Bruce describe it because the I'm a massive Bruce fan. He was and to tell you, Christina, he was my first ever concert I ever saw. I saw him at 10 years old. I've seen him 4 or 5 times, and each concert's a different experience. And when I went 2 times ago, I went on the anniversary tour for the River, the double album that everybody loves if you're a true Springsteen fan. And he tells a story both on the live album of 75 and he tells a lot of stories in the 75, 85 about his father and the differences that they had, and his parents wanting him not to be in rock and roll. And his father wanted him to be a lawyer. His mom wanted him to be an author. And he says it on the song Growing Up there. He goes, well, one of you wanted a lawyer, the other one wanted an author. Tonight, you're just going to have to settle for rock and roll. And then they go into the end of Growing Up, which is wonderful. But then he also talks about how there's this, it goes right into the River on the third album. And he talks about how his father and him didn't see eye to eye, hated them. You know, he didn't call it the Fender guitar or this guitar. Oh, let's call it the goddamn guitar. And he had to turn it all the way down, and they were having a fight left and right. And, you know, the war was about to happen and everything. And he was just fed up with them. And he was just like, you know what, just go, cause he was thinking about going and everything. And, the night before he decided not to, and he wasn't going to go. And he goes into to his father's kitchen, and his father's there waiting for him. And Bruce says, they didn't take me. And his father said, that's good. Because, he's saying, I didn't want you to go. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of the hard stuff that my grandfather and my father went through. And that's why that song means so much to me, because that song is about a young man and him not understanding that his father doesn't want him to grow up and leave. And within that, they don't, because the young kid's like, it's my Independence Day, and, all sons must go away come Independence Day. And the father is there sitting there going like, he's actually my world, and I've been hard on him, and we yell and we bicker at each other. It's such a conversational song, which is such an interesting thing to write about. It was one of his first songs he wrote about fathers and sons, and then he tackles that deeply within the Nebraska stuff. So in that film, the father and the son in that movie are very much at odds with one another. So you've got 3 generations in this film, my family, and then Bruce's family. 3 different families. And I was watching that film with my dad, and he was in massive tears. My grandfather didn't want him to go to college. He didn't want him because he was the youngest, his last child, and they always would bicker and fight. My uncle told my grandfather, you got to let him go. I know this is killing you, but he's got to go and be his own man. And he let him go. And my grandfather said that was the hardest thing he ever had to do, was to let him go. And they, much like Bruce and much like in that film, post time in college, post realizing how hard the world is, they had a massively great relationship. But there was that struggle for those 5 years or so, where you don't know how to speak to maybe the most important person in your life. And that's what Independence Day is all about. So I think that is, it maybe is not the best film, but it is one of the more important tracks in use. And when that moment happened in that film, I was like, thank God, because they were using the same like 5 songs of that movie. I'm like, please use some of this rich material. And then they did. And I went, well, shit, I'm a mess in this like 3-star movie, I'm like on the floor.
Well, that's good when that happens. What about in terms of he's not one of those ones that's been done a lot of cameos and as an actor like
No,
some have. That's not his thing.
no, he's got that great moment in High Fidelity, where Cusack's kind of like
He
talking
gives
and
him like advice.
he gives him like advice and has like this conversation back and forth. And that's such a movie about a love of music. But then Bruce kind of, like he always does for us, he just gives him a life lesson.
Mhm.
And it's so great. And yeah, I wish he was in more things because I actually think he's got like a dry humor to him. Um, like Bruce and my other favorite singer songwriter from the band Wilco, Jeff Tweedy, they have this dry sense of humor to them that makes then I think their powerful lyrics even more impactful. And it makes the contrast of these powerful things being said from this person to this really like non-serious, jokey, person that you can kind of become in touch with. Like people would put that, like yourself, even for me, put the nickname the boss out there, but he also is like always having fun and joking and building like this really great camaraderie with the U Street Band.
But you see
And
that when he's on stage, you see that when he's
yeah,
giving interviews, but it's probably not his thing to come in and do a script. I mean, we'd probably be happy with him not doing cameos and
no, I don't think he, and also that, I don't know, that kind of keeps like, I guess, a little bit of the mystery there too,
exactly.
you know?
But going back to the biopic that's coming up, we have seen that he's been hanging around on
Hell
set
yeah.
a lot
Hell
and
yeah.
lots of paparazzi pictures of him hugging Jeremy Allen White and all this. Are you worried about that? Because biopics that are
No, because he's not
controlled by,
I'm not as worried about that as I am with like some people because he's not a producer on the film. Scott Stuber, who used to be one of the big heads over at Netflix, this is his first main project with his studio, which is why I think it will be at the Telluride Film Festival, and I think it will play some places. And they need this movie to be successful, and to justify it. And but I think that, I mean, they shot it in Asbury Park, and they were shooting it in Jersey in his hometown, um, and they allowed him to, and Jeremy Allen White wanted him there, but and to hear all some of the early stuff, it was like if he wasn't there, it wouldn't be right. He didn't meddle with anything. He didn't write scripts or anything, but he did. I think he also, from that book that came out about, like the book that it's based on, he's an advocate of that. Like he was a fan of it. So, and he gave interviews and was uncompromising in what he said in there. So, um,
and he
you
also
know,
just wrote his own biography, which is excellent.
exactly, which is excellent. And I have the signed copy over there. And he, but no, I just think that he's just around it to be around it. I mean, it's his story. I don't think that it's like I don't think it's a bad thing because he's not in the creative, thing. Like Elton John was a producer on his, and or the
And the
the
Queen guys.
Queen guy. I mean,
Oh,
fuck the Queen guys. Like literally, like those guys were like, well, this is, and like to hear Sacha Baron Cohen talk about what they originally wanted for that and all that. It's like, no, that
well,
sounds
they
horrible.
they
So
made their own narrative.
they did, and they got they're laughing at all of us because they made a crap ton of money. So, but yeah, I'm not worried about it too much with that.
Because there are some big biopics, musical biopics coming up. I'm thinking of Antoine Fuqua's Michael, the
Well,
Michael
shit, talk about
Jackson
meddling.
biopic. Yeah, that's we were hearing a lot about that. I mean,
Yeah,
I just recently read that there's a Sinead O'Connor biopic coming up, which is actually based on an incredibly good documentary.
yeah,
So
I
I
always read
have
that.
hopes for that. But this is a particularly the musical biopic that you and I have talked about before that has become somewhat of a joke after
Well, I mean, like Walk Hard
Walk
fucking killed
Hard
all this
killed
shit.
it.
Like, and then the Weird Al Yankovic film kind of
Yeah.
did it too, and it's like, We get, and then pop star never stopping kind of killed it too. It's like these people don't understand that like they're making these $1 billion, $1 million movies, and
How can they do this one to not make it feel like Walk Hard and
well, I think they've already started, because I think like the idea of like the thing about like a complete unknown that still drives me nuts, even though I think the movie's pretty fine. Like I liked it more than I thought I was, because I remember I was going to hate the shit out of that thing. The thing that still annoys me, it was like when that movie ends, you're like, okay, now let's get to the cool shit. You know what I mean? Like let's get to the rest. And then you kind of remember, oh, that's what I'm Not There is for. And I'm not saying like, and that's playing with the tropes of the genre and what you could do in six different people and stuff. And Scott Cooper's not going to do that here, but making it kind of like Love and Mercy is a good example. Brian
Brian
Wilson
Wilson's? Yeah, that's
film
excellent.
where they have two different parts of his life. It's not like they, hey, when they pick, when they did like, Surfing USA, like they, they talked about when they made Pet Sounds, and then when he met his wife, right? So that's kind of like what they're doing here. They're the most important album of said person's career is the focal point. Like if they did
But there will
if they
be
did
flashbacks, obviously, with
there will be
his
some
father.
flashbacks, but that is because it's not a flashback to like, hey, remember when we sat there and wrote, Born to Run? God, I hope not.
Yeah, or like
Is
that my entire career hinges on the fact that my brother died and my parents,
exactly like
whatever
wrong kid
did.
died, right? You know what I mean? But like, no, is that like they're gonna hark back to the fact that at this time he was thinking about a lot of the stuff from his childhood, and how his father was and how hard his father was. And I think and he wasn't thinking about that during the Born to Run, Darkness on the Edge of Town. He was thinking about a little bit towards the end of the river, so that's why it makes sense for them to do this. But I don't think it's going to be like, I think like making it about one era. Like if they made a Fleetwood Mac biopic, I don't want to know about like the forming of the band and everything. Like, just give me about Rumors,
We
because
want
that's
the end
all
of
I
it,
give
right?
a shit about. Is that crazy goddamn album being made and everybody fucking everybody on that one? You know what I mean? Like that's what you want to see, and that's interesting enough. Like the Michael Jackson one, that one's going to be cradle to grave, because we've
And
known Michael
also, a lot of
Jackson.
things will not be in that one.
Oh yeah, trust me, I'm going to be very vocal when that one comes out, um, because the weird revisionist history that we've had as a culture, and some people have had with clearly what Michael Jackson's done, but want to just sweep it under the table. But if they did do from the time he was a kid to now, I mean, like we've known Michael Jackson as a child all the way till when he died. So that makes sense to do with something like that. You know, it's the Bob Marley's and the Whitney Houston's and the Aretha Franklin's document ones, and even Elvis, where you're just like, these are the same like scripts, just done over and over again.
Insert new artist.
But the other thing that's got to be key in this is I think it has to deliver unique special performances. It can't feel like they're just walking through it. Like that's why, like, even though Elvis isn't like, I don't like Elvis. Okay. I didn't like the movie. And I don't like Elvis really as an artist. But Austin Butler is undeniably kind of great in that movie. He's delivering a movie star performance. Chalamet, people like love that performance. They thought it was almost good enough to win an Oscar. You know,
Well, the movie
that
that really told me something about Elvis was Sofia Coppola's Priscilla.
yes, exactly. And he's the more of the supporting character in that film. I mean, like you
Exactly,
look
but
at Judy Garland, like that movie with Renee Zellweger, she won an Oscar for a small section of her life, right? But she's playing the most, sad version of that, and that movie is not very good either. But people attach themselves to that movie. I think that it's all going to come on the back of Jeremy Allen White, and if you can buy in and believe him, he's a phenomenal actor. And Christina, the people that have been close to this say in the trailer at that end when it's Born to Run, That's him singing. And if that's him singing, that's just the greatest biopic performance I've ever seen. Because if you closed your eyes, you would think that it's Bruce Springsteen singing, but they say it's Jeremy Allen White, and I'm like, no fucking way. They're like, no way, that's him. But they say it is. So if he delivers off that and he's singing and he sounds like him and he pulls this off, it's not even just like about like with the movie work. I'd be like, how many awards is he going to win at that point?
I'm not worried about the trio we've been talking about. Jeremy Allen White, Jeremy Strong, and Stephen Graham are tremendous actors who I know will give everything. I mean, for me, it's this. I mean, what I want is something like an Amadeus, right? Where the director, where the screenwriter is zeroing in on a thought about this artist, right? On
Mm-hmm.
something that they struggle with and making it their own. Um, and I think both you and I are really excited about another movie that potentially may come to Telluride, Mother Mary, David Lowery's movie with Anne Hathaway, which basically seems to be like a movie about a pop star and fame, but not one in particular, right?
Yeah.
That type of thing, which is very interesting. And I think that if they can, if Cooper and Jeremy Allen White and this the book that it's based on can capture what they're trying to say about Bruce and it's like stick to that theme and deliver it so we have a gut punch as strong as listening to Nebraska itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in a good place.
I think so too. And I mean, like, I would love. I don't know if the Bruce Springsteen film like Amadeus is what we're gonna get here.
No, I was just
Like,
making an example of like the
no,
whole,
no, that's a. I mean, that's a wonderful example of taking the biopic and the musical
the
biopic.
whole
And
sort of jealousy aspect and the Salieri thing is such an incredible way of telling the story of
yeah,
artistry, right?
no, I think you're right. I think like it has to be. That's why, like, honestly, you could. You could like Fleetwood Mac is a perfect example
It
of like
is.
an artist of a band and an artist and something like Stevie Nicks and having the relationship stuff like that's a juicy enough story. They just don't want their story told. They don't want to live through all that. One day it will be, and we'll watch it at the mountains of Telluride. But I think that for this. I think that love and mercy is the way to go, and I think that that is what I kind of want out of this and anticipate more than a complete unknown. Like complete unknown is very basic level stuff. I think that this is going to be more emotional because Scott Cooper doesn't like Scott Cooper is a more independent minded filmmaker, and if it's in the vein of like Crazy Heart, well, then I'm all kind of game for that because that's a
Me
movie
too.
about someone's inner struggles and alcoholism and their place of fame and things of that, as opposed to like James Mangold, who makes popcorn entertainment movies for 50-year-old dads. So I think like while this is gonna try to be that a little bit, I think there's like pump the brakes on expectations of this being a massive crowd pleaser. Like I think that this, if it's playing at film festivals like this, I think that there's a little bit of like, this is actually going to be a more of a drama, and it's going to be about songs that particularly a lot of people don't know, and if you do know the one or two songs in this, it's well then it's like, oh well, that's when he created that. Okay, cool, but like he created Born in the USA during this time, but it was a demo. He didn't take it to the full band until he goes after. So a lot of like those the personalities of the E Street Band are not going to really be fully here all the way. It's going to be a showcase for him, and I think that that's what I find more interesting is it's going to be a lot of like him taking full control of this movie. There won't be like a I don't know how much of a Colonel Tom Parker, bullshit character like that, or Edward Norton's forehead. But then again, like Jeremy Strong's hair looks out of control. So,
Oh, I
but
think
I
he's going to be good.
but I think it'll be I'm not as worried about it as when I found out about the project. When I found out that they were going to do a Bruce movie, I was like, ugh. But
Oh.
then but I like Jeremy Allen White. I think he's perfect casting. I think that the book and the material's perfect. I'm not a like again, I'm not like Scott Cooper's my guy, but he could, but like I think he can deliver something like this that could be really, really good. So I'm excited for it. I just also know I'm a sucker for Bruce Springsteen. I know this, my bias is going into this damn movie already.
That's
And
okay.
I know that I'm gonna, whenever certain songs are played, I'm going like when My Father's House plays or Nebraska or or whatever. I'm gonna be a freaking mess. If they do Mansion on the Hill, I'm destroyed. They do Atlantic City, I'm gonna be tapping my feet, and it's gonna be very hard for me to write notes because I'm gonna be either writing lyrics or I'm gonna just be like full on at a fucking concert at that point. So it's good,
Well,
you know.
if it screens, we still don't know when we're recording this. If it screens to tell it, I'll be there for you. You can weep on my shoulder, and we'll publish this anyway, even if it's not, because eventually the movie will come
It's
out.
gonna
But
come out.
hopefully, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm even more excited now after talking to you about it, Ryan. So tell everyone where they can find you and read everything and listen to your podcasts.
Well, you can find me in the mountains of Telluride, probably crying with Christina here very soon. And you can find my written work as well as podcasts over at awardswatch.com. Director Watch podcasts. We're starting the Ozu series while we're at Telluride. Look forward to that on all of our platforms. By the time this is already released, I have also an interview with Severance star Adam Scott on the website that I'm very proud of. Uh, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, where I'm talking about all this stuff and local politics and movies and sports teams because it's football season and all this different stuff. You can find all that stuff on those platforms at Ryan McQuade 77.
You have your hands full.
Too much. Too much.
You guys can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Christina Biro, and of course, Pop Culture Confidential, wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.